though, it is going to be a Ninetales from Nathan's side.
So Nathan sending out that Ninetales and the Arcanine as his lead. Tapu Koko and Arcanine out on the lead for Baris' side of the field.
No, I do like the matchup in this case because I think Baris has played it very well. He kept his Ninetales in the back, which I think is a smarter decision. We're going to see the Intimidates all around with this combination of Arcanines. But Tapu Koko here, pretty steady, dealing some damage onto this Arcanine, especially with the electric terrain up. We do actually see when we look at Nathan's team, thinking back to team preview, he doesn't have a way to change the terrain. So the Tapu Koko on Baris' side of the field is always going to be able to capitalize on that. It's always going to have that up without it being contested at all. This Ninetales is going to be a little bit concerned about the Arcanine on Baris' side, and that could be something, if he maybe doubles into it, immediately removes it from play, he could find himself at Pokemon disadvantage almost immediately.
Porygon 2 out on the field as Arcanine on Baris' side of the field attacks that Ninetales immediately. Tapu Koko following up with a Thunderbolt. Arcanine hoping to break the focus sash, but Ninetales, if it's holding one, we don't know, as it survives that Thunderbolt and is able to use the Aurora Veil to boost the defenses of Nathan's Pokemon for the next at least several turns.
And this, with the Pokemon he brings in being Porygon, looks like he might be trying to set up a Trick Room for something like a Snorlax on his side. This Aurora Veil is going to work similarly to, just bulking up everything on your team in reducing the overall damage that you take. So that could be very curious to see how that one shakes out for him. But it's good information for Baris, actually, as he heads towards Game 2 and maybe even 3, that the combination of Extreme Speed and Thunderbolt doesn't get the knockout on Ninetales.
If there's going to be a Trick Room played, it most likely will be an attempt this turn. Snorlax out on the field for that. Ninetales, Tapu Koko switching out on Baris' side of the field thanks to the help of that Volt Switch attack. It's a little bit of damage down on that Porygon 2 on its way out. And Baris, seeing that Trick Room coming, sends in his Snorlax so that he's better prepared to deal with the twisting of the dimensions. Arcanine with the Flare Blitz into the Porygon 2. Porygon's just happy to shake that off, and no Trick Room. Instead uses Thunderbolt to target down that Arcanine.
Well, this is the Porygon, the only thing on Nathan's team that can actually capitalize on this electric terrain with the Thunderbolt. It is interesting to see that he doesn't go for the Trick Room, though. Even though he brings in his Snorlax, looks like it's going to be the obvious play. He respects the fact that Baris has a Snorlax of his own, lets him show it before making that decision. Instead of going with a blind decision, he makes an informed decision on whether he should be setting up Trick Room or not. I definitely think that's a better play from Nathan, not immediately giving the Trick Room to the oncoming Snorlax from Baris.
He does have to worry about Porygon 2 taking another 2 potential hits here. Porygon 2 is sitting just above half its health, which means it probably could get knocked out here if, I don't know, maybe there's a critical hit or something. It's putting him in a little bit of a rougher situation to maybe try and go for that Trick Room, but who knows, maybe he feels like he doesn't need it right now. But hey, second Flare Blitz into that Porygon 2 leaves it at just below half of its health. Arcanine takes some chip damage, and Porygon 2 goes for the recover, so I think it's safe to say that Trick Room isn't really on Nathaniel's mind anymore. And Snorlax on his side of the field goes immediately for that Belly Drum, cuts its health in half, maximizes its tax, and thanks to the help of that Gluttony ability and that Berry it eats in a pinch, will restore its health almost back up to full. But Baris matches Belly Drum for Belly Drum, gets a little bit of a drum circle going here, and we get 2 Snorlaxes with a lot of attack power to contend with.
The curious thing when I'm looking at this turn is how much Baris is focusing on this Porygon 2. He almost wants it to set up Trick Room, but he wants it to set up Trick Room at a time where it's very, very low on health. He may be trying to wear it down just so this Snorlax on his side can deal with it. But these Snorlaxes are going to match up very interestingly. We saw Baris's did Belly Drum actually after Nathan's there, so that could be an indication that it's a little bit slower, or they are exactly the same. I'm not quite sure how that one shakes out for them, but it could be curious to see exactly how it pans out, especially if a Trick Room is coming into play.
Nathaniel not ready to set up Trick Room. Arcanine out on the field for that Porygon 2, intimidating the Snorlax on Baris' side of the field and that Arcanine as well. Arcanine goes for its third Flare Blitz in a row, crashing into the Snorlax this time, and gets the burn on that Snorlax. So now, even though it did use the Belly Drum, its attack is now cut in half. Snorlax going for a return into the opposing Snorlax, and Snorlax on Baris' side of the field going for a frustration. And after hail and burn damage, that Snorlax might get knocked out.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very close indeed. And you see that Baris, that would be a good reason to keep using this Flare Blitz. It is just fishing for that burn, and getting it, of course, on Nathan's Snorlax definitely helps him out. The burn does not do enough to take the knockout. The Snorlax on Nathan's side is going to be sticking around for one more turn.
That is such a tricky position to be in, because if you're Baris, chances are you'll probably attack the Snorlax once, maybe with that Arcanine, just to ensure the knockout. But if Baris just assumes that the burn or the hail will knock it out, Snorlax could potentially go for something like Recycle and get all of that health back.
Well, we do know that Baris has extreme speed on his Arcanine. We're going to see a move out of Nathan's Arcanine first, though.
Close combat to knock out that Snorlax at the cost of Nathaniel's Arcanine's defenses. So no more Snorlax on Baris' side of the field, and judging by where this Flare Blitz is going, probably no more Snorlax on Nathaniel's side of the field as well. So just 2 Arcanine left standing at the end of this turn.
Both players trading away their belly drum boosted Snorlax just because they needed to get it done. I think that's very smart play from both players, knowing that they got it set up, but neither of them was really in a significantly better position to try and capitalize on it. Of course, Nathan's was burned, but it just did so much damage. Now we've got the pair of Arcanines on the field, and without this, we see why Nathan probably didn't want to set up Trick Room. Whatever he has remaining, the Ninetales in the back doesn't want Trick Room set up, so maybe he was kind of aware that he needed to get a little bit more out of it.
Porygon 2 out on the field for Nathaniel, Garchomp out for Baris. So with the reveal that Garchomp, we now know all the Pokemon that these trainers have decided to bring to this match.
Yeah, and we do know, of course, that the last Pokemon from Baris is that Tapu Koko, so I think he's going to have to be careful about when he switches it in. The big thing for Baris, though, is that Tapu Koko is around for the Ninetales coming back from Nathan. We do know the Ninetales would beat this Garchomp pretty much one-on-one. So in this case, Baris could actually just sacrifice his Arcanine, give it up to something like the Porygon, and then be able to bring in Tapu Koko for free and just round out this game.
Porygon 2 dodging the Rock Slide from that Garchomp, giving it the opportunity to Ice Beam that Garchomp this turn. Arcanine with the Flare Blitz into that Porygon 2. It does enough damage and recoil to itself, so we see it eat that berry in a pinch. It's holding that Aguav berry. Porygon 2, no Ice Beam. Instead, going for the Trick Room, which will allow it to move first going into the next turn.
Yes, well, we talked a little bit about Ninetales and how important it would be to get the Tapu Koko in front of the Ninetales. Now, in this case, it does change a little bit. What Baris actually needs to do is keep the Arcanine around for the Ninetales. Now, I don't know if Nathan respected the potential berry activation from Baris' Arcanine in that turn, but he did let him get it off, so now with the Trick Room set up, even when Ninetales comes back to play, the Arcanine's going to be able to deal with it. This Porygon 2 is probably going to be needed to do a lot of the damage.
Arcanine leaving the field, Ninetales taking the field in its place, bringing back with it that nice hail that will start dealing a little bit of chip damage to all of the Pokemon on the field besides itself. And Porygon 2 with that Ice Beam into the Garchomp. Will it be enough for the knockout? Garchomp is able to hold on. Arcanine with another Flare Blitz targeting the Ninetales for that knockout. And whatever Garchomp does here could do a lot of damage to that Porygon 2 if it's something like the Z move, maybe another Rock Slide. That's what it is. It's a Rock Slide going to connect with the Porygon 2, and that's the end of this turn.
I would suggest that the continued use of Rock Slide does give Nathan a little bit of an idea on what exactly Baris is doing with that Pokemon, and that may be something that completely changes this matchup for him. But this is information that Nathan still has to figure out in the middle of a match, and that's certainly not an easy thing to do. Yes, Trick Room is up right now, and, this Porygon 2 would be able to throw out Ice Beams first, but he's still got to get through an Arcanine and a Tapu Koko on Baris' side, which is certainly a big ask for, an Arcanine and a Porygon 2, which isn't really known for its offensive prowess.
No, but looking at the way the field is set up this turn, chances are that Garchomp will be knocked out, barring something like a Protect to stop it from taking damage from that Porygon 2. Arcanine has been intimidated a couple of times now, so I think it's smart that Barry is switching it out and sending in the Tapu Koko in its place, bringing back that electric terrain as well. So Arcanine able to come in next turn. If that Garchomp is knocked out by this Ice Beam, which is exactly what happens, intimidate the Arcanine on Nathaniel's side of the field and maybe give Baris a little bit of an out moving forward. Arcanine on Nathan's side of the field going for the close combat into Tapu Koko. It's not very effective and doesn't deal a lot of damage.
And it lowers his defense as well.
And it lowers his defenses as well.
The switch into that Fairy type very, very useful for Baris here. He does get the Tapu Koko in safely. Obviously, would be better without the Trick Room. But he does take up that close combat and mean that overall, you know, what we're going to see is some more damage. Now's a great time to go on it. That Aurora Veil that's been really doing work for Nathaniel all game. You know, we've noticed the damage output being lower, but the lack of that Aurora Veil now means the damage output's back to normal for Baris, so he's going to be able to start dealing a lot more damage. And even though Aurora Veil was up, he still managed to keep the Pokemon count at exactly even.
Yeah, so it's coming down to these final turns here, Nathaniel versus Baris, and that's exactly what you want to see when you're seeing two players completely undefeated in round 6 of Swiss. Tapu Koko revealing that it has Protect, Porygon 2 with the Thunderbolt into Arcanine, happy to take advantage of that electric terrain that Tapu Koko brought back, as Baris' Arcanine goes for the Flare Blitz into Nathaniel's Arcanine.
Yeah, I think that Flare Blitz, just trying to trade now. I still feel like Baris is in a really commanding position, but something may be changing that.
That was the Firium Z move there. So it looks like Nathaniel's Arcanine is going to go into an Inferno Overdrive. One of the most powerful Fire-type Z moves. In fact, I think the only Fire-type Z move. Going to crash into that Tapu Koko, sending it up in an explosion of flames. Thanks to the Protect, it doesn't take a lot of damage, but it looked like that hurt.
Yeah, we do see that Protect coming in absolutely invaluable. I think Nathaniel needed the knockout on Tapu Koko there. And a smart Protect from Baris to just keep it around for another turn. We are going to see a nice round of chip damage from the Hail, which Nathaniel manages to, you know, keep on the field. But overall, you know, not taking knockouts there could become a bit of a problem, especially as we move towards the back end of this game. I think Nathan probably in still a fairly comfortable position, because of that Porygon putting the pressure down on the Arcanine, and then Arcanine putting pressure down on Tapu Koko. Definitely works out very, very nicely. But, you know, Baris has learned a lot about Nathan's team in this game. He's learned so much about it that he can push on to in Game 3 with.
Definitely. That's one of the downsides, I think, to winning a Game 1 in a situation like this. You know, Baris, he knows your Z move, assuming you only have one of them. He knows that you like to tend a little bit towards Trick Room to help manage, you know, Tapu Koko and the threat it brings to that Ninetales. And it just gives out a lot of information. I think Close Combat on that Arcanine is a bit of a tech that hasn't been as relevant in the current metagame as it has been in past years. But hey, information's the name of the game, and that will certainly be helpful going into Game 2. Flare Blitz from Arcanine on Nathaniel's side of the field, knocking out the Tapu Koko on Baris' side of the field. Baris' Arcanine uses Protect, so it won't take any damage, but it still has a little bit of a tall order if it wants to be able to knock out both the Porygon 2 and the Arcanine, given that it looks like maybe one more hit from that Hail will knock it out.
Yeah, the shake of the head from Baris there. As the Trick Room comes to an end, you know, it doesn't really matter. We do know that Arcanine is very limited in its moves, not in really the offensive or the defensive and supportive moves, but, you know, the offensive moves, it's usually carrying just Flare Blitz. We're going to see a forfeit locked in from Baris, a quick shake of the hands between the players, and, you know, Nathan's going to go into Game 2 with a win under his belt. Baris there looking rather wistful about what happened in that game, taking all that information that he learned in and figuring out what to do with it in this game too.
So I think one thing that's interesting that might come into play, despite the information that Nathan revealed that last game, is the fact that Nathan still has that Torkoal and Lilligant sitting in his party. I know sometimes if a trainer decides to run a team that's sort of split like this, where you have two sort of interesting, maybe somewhat obvious modes, Game 1 you bring one, you win or you lose. Game 2 you bring the other, and hopefully, you know, just mixing it up that much is enough to sort of throw off your opponent. I'm not sure if it's relevant here, but Nathan certainly clicked in his Pokemon very quickly. Baris as well.
Yeah, Baris, fairly confident. I think what Baris needs to look at in this game, something that we didn't touch on too much because we just saw reduced damage across the board. You know, we mentioned it when Aurora Veil came into play. But there was no real answer to that from Baris, and I don't know if he respected it enough. He kept going for attacks, and particularly when we saw the two Snorlaxes matching up, we didn't see the amount of damage that you'd expect from a belly drum boosted Snorlax. Baris, clearly seeing the value of Aurora Veil, does decide to just bring one of his own. If you can't beat him, join him.
I was literally just about to say that. You stole my line.
That's pretty much what I do. But no, the matchup here is another interesting one. The Tapu Koko on Baris' side of the field almost has to respect the Snorlax in this very weird way that he has to think about the potential high horsepower. There's not been an Intimidate down, and I don't know if he wants to switch out. There's the potential for a nice Volt switch that we saw before. If he could get out and then do some damage to Snorlax on the way out, get Arcanine in, then a high horsepower into that slot would really reduce the damage because of the Intimidate. We're not going to see that to begin this game, though.
Yeah, we're starting off this game with a bit of a dance. That Tapu Koko going for the Gigavolt Havoc thanks to its Electrium Z hold item. Going to target down one of these Pokemon on Nathan's side of the field and try and hope for a knockout. I would imagine he's targeting the Snorlax with that.
Yeah, it's probably what he really wants to move.
Oh, no, not at all.
No, he decides that that would probably be the better thing. But this Ninetales is immediately knocked out. There's no Focus Sash on this Ninetales, and I think that's a decision that we've seen from Baris in Team Preview, looking at some of the other Pokemon on his team. Snorlax takes that Blizzard pretty comfortably and uses this opportunity to try and set up for itself.
I mean, going into this game, you mentioned, not respecting the Aurora Veil and knocking out the Pokemon that would have set up Aurora Veil in one hit, in addition to giving yourself the opportunity to set up your own Aurora Veil against a Belly Drum Snorlax. Probably the play that Barry was looking for to sort of give it the respect that it deserves.
Well, I think that play works very well. Ninetales are, of course, they're two Ninetales, and what we're going to see there is a really interesting matchup because they were probably matching together to see if the Ninetales on Baris' side went first, and then would be able, if there was a Focus Sash, to knock it out with that Blizzard, which wasn't going to be a problem. This Snorlax with Belly Drum could be a bit of a problem now, but Baris has two Pokemon to throw attacks at it with. It's got Tapu Koko boosted by the Electric Terrain, which is going to do significant damage, and then it's got Ninetales with the Blizzard. We've seen the Blizzard and the chip damage from Hail do a lot. Of course, if one brings it under half, it then gets to boost itself back up. And then with the berry, the hit points being boosted back up that it is, and then the potential high horsepower coming out could be absolutely great.
Thunder from that Tapu Koko targeting down the Snorlax, and Snorlax using Recycle to restore its health. So Nathaniel not going to attack with the Snorlax this turn, but Snorlax moving before the Ninetales, who uses Roar to stop the Porygon 2 from using Trick Room.
Yes, the Ninetales not moving reveals that it's got Roar. One of those moves that people have been adding onto Ninetales is kind of that coverage move. Now he's given it away, maybe something he wanted to save for a dire situation, but he doesn't want Trick Room to go up under any circumstance. He now has the option, if he can stick around, to even Roar out that Snorlax after all these boosts and recycles. Just get it off the field for now. So Baris giving up a very interesting piece of information, but it's absolutely paying dividends for him to do so.
And that is such a cool tech on Ninetales. We've seen Icy Wind on Ninetales, we've seen Aurora Veil, we've seen Blizzard, and now we can add Roar to that list. Thunderbolt from Tapu Koko missing the knockout on Arcanine, who's going to do a little dance of its own, that Inferno Overdrive. Not intimidated this time around, so should do an interesting amount of damage to one of these Pokemon.
It should be doing a lot, to see exactly where it gets the knockout. We did see it go into a Protect in the last game, so it did absolutely minimal damage, but with the no Protect on the Tapu Koko, it is a comfortable knockout. So Nathaniel there, doing very well. Snorlax buying itself plenty of time here.
Yeah, Snorlax happy to take this opportunity to use Recycle and get its berry back before it's scared off the field by that Ninetales, and the Porygon 2 is dragged right back out.
It'll be curious to see if Baris keeps going for these Roars. Now he's not so pressured to do it because the Snorlax is not alongside this Porygon 2, but, he does need to keep respecting Trick Room. There does, of course, come a point, if it gets to that point in the game, where Nathan doesn't actually have any Pokemon remaining, so he can't be roared out. All he needs to do there, I think, is if it comes down to 2-2, it could be interesting. We see the Celesteela come out from Baris, and that definitely is interesting because he doesn't have Inferno Overdrive from this Arcanine. That's Nathan's Arcanine. not able to tidy it up.
Yeah, and that's an adjustment from game one. We saw, the Arcanine use that Inferno Overdrive game one. So why Barry thought, oh, that's a fire move Arcanine that has its C move. Why bring the Celesteela? I'm assuming he has a great plan because who knows, right? Ninetales with that Blizzard targeting down the Snorlax and the Porygon 2, who fires back a Thunder to deal some damage, and Porygon 2 gets hit by the Leech Seed.
Yeah, the Thunderbolt coming out is going to do a little bit of damage. I do like how that one works out, but the Celesteela coming in could be kind of an indication of how Baris wants to see the end of this game out. Really grind it to a halt, start wearing things down with blizzards and hail damage and leech seeds. Getting leech seed down on Porygon 2 is really an interesting way of putting a timer on it. Not many people put the timer on it that early. And if it forces switches, Ninetales is probably going to be able to start getting some chip damage down of its own. The Snorlax is so important for Nathan right now, and he's going to have to do so much with it without the use of Belly Drum, which I'm sure while he's been training the Snorlax is something he's often considering.
Ninetales with the Aurora Veil back out in the field. So we're going to see that Celesteela's defenses be boosted even more. Celesteela happy to keep using that Leech Seed to connect with the Snorlax this time to give itself even more health. Snorlax using Return to almost knock out the Ninetales, but more importantly, we didn't see Aurora that turn, so Porygon 2 happy to set up that Trick Room.
Yeah, setting up the Trick Room is really important. There's no residual hail damage anymore, but Celesteela is now getting 2 rounds of Leech Seed every single time. That's going to be so much recovery. We see Snorlax dive back in for another one of those Figgy Berries. And, it's going to have to start dealing damage. Now it's at full health. Now is a great time to do it. He doesn't want to have to spend any more time setting up recycles. Porygon 2 is going to have its Thunderbolt, limited by, of course, this lack of electric terrain for now. That's not really what it needs. It probably needs a more powerful Thunderbolt to start dealing with this Celesteela. But Porygon 2 could also pick up the knockout on Celesteela, while Snorlax might be forced to try and deal with the Celesteela itself, which with those returns or high horsepower that's not effective at all, that could be a very slow process.
There is still the Arcanine in the back of Nathaniel's party, but it has such low health. One has to wonder if it would even be able to attack that Celesteela before it getting knocked out. Celesteela revealing that it has Air Slash, attacking the Porygon 2 and getting the flinch. Ninetales using Roar on that Snorlax. So I guess Nathaniel gets the free switch in for Arcanine here. Doesn't have to worry about it taking any damage on that switch. Gets to intimidate the 2 special attacking Pokemon on the opposing side of the field. But if Celesteela can move before Arcanine this turn, Arcanine won't really have a chance to go for any sort of Flare Blitz or other move that will help its partners out.
Yeah, these come down to very big decisions overall for both these players, I think. Nathan's definitely up against it with his Pokemon on very, very low hit points indeed, and he needs to make the right calls. If he didn't get flinched by the Air Slash on that turn, I think we would have been in for a very, very interesting matchup. But Porygon 2 is still able to do a decent amount of work under this Trick Room. It could try and pick up a knockout on Ninetales, assuming it can take another attack from the Celesteela. It could buy itself more time with a Recover, or it could just try and deal with, absolutely anything that comes in. He does just have to be very careful with it, and while he's being careful with it, he also needs to try and work in some recovers.
Arcanine protecting this turn, not ready to get knocked out by that Celesteela. Celesteela going for the Air Slash again, targeting down that Porygon 2. Is it going to flinch again? It does. Ninetales with the Freeze Dry attacking the protecting Arcanine. So Celesteela is happy to pick up the rest of that knockout on the Porygon 2 thanks to the Leech Seed, and it's down to just the Snorlax and the Arcanine versus the Ninetales and the Celesteela on Baris' side of the field.
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting to see how it pans out. Of course, he has Trick Room up, but this Snorlax has not found itself in a great position. It spent a lot of time bringing up its attack with the Belly Drum, but it's not been able to capitalize on it yet, and giving away that information that Roar is on the team is very interesting from Baris. I'm not quite sure if that's something he wanted to give up or he just felt absolutely compelled to give it up in this game. It has paid off for him though, so in that case, it's totally worth it. Nathan's going to have to get so much out of this Snorlax that I don't think he's going to be able to get all he needs out of it, especially with this Celesteela, a lovely adaptation at the team preview stage by Baris.
Well, we've seen a lot of Cinderella stories come out earlier today, so you never know. It is not over until it's over, and Snorlax using Belly Drum to give itself a bit of a motivation boost, boosts its attack back up. It still has that berry that it saved for later, so it's able to restore all the health that it just consumed thanks to that Belly Drum. Celesteela with a Air Slash, not going for a flinch this time, instead trying to knock out that Arcanine, which it does get, so it's just Snorlax versus these last two Pokemon. Celesteela gets the Beast Boost in its defense, and Ninetales with that Freeze Dry will target the Snorlax for a little bit of damage.
Snorlax not taking any damage in that case, but seeing the defense boost come through out of Beast Boost on this Celesteela is really sealing up the game, in my opinion, in Baris' favor. You know, it means he's going to struggle to deal with this Celesteela, and he does want to spend time using Recycle, which is not a premium use of his time.
Well, it all comes down to whether or not this Leech Seed connects, which it doesn't. Celesteela dodging the Leech Seed, a second Freeze Dry from that Ninetales. You know, I think if that Leech Seed did connect there, that Recycle would have been a waste of the turn, but Snorlax got a little lucky there, was able to dance around a bit longer, dodge the Leech Seed, and still be in this game.
It's very, very close indeed, and he's watching those Recycles very well. I think when Leech Seed comes down from the Celesteela, it immediately gets a whole lot harder for him. And without Trick Room support, Snorlax is just going to have to be very lucky that it doesn't take too much damage. Another
Dodges
avoid.
It again. Snorlax with that return to finally knock out the Ninetales. Celesteela versus Snorlax. Celesteela's been a bit unlucky with those Leech Seeds. Snorlax... Oh, and there's the Garchomp. I completely forgot he was back there.
Yeah, it is interesting. You know, Garchomp is now free to Earthquake. That could be very, very interesting. You know, it probably going to be just trying to deal as much damage as possible. But, you know, if Snorlax doesn't get knocked out, if maybe Celesteela plays it a little bit too safe, we could see Nathan swing this game back in his favor. The miss on the Leech Seeds has been very, very important. Missing two back-to-back is far from ideal, and it does give Snorlax a little bit of breathing room.
You know, one thing I wouldn't be surprised to see here is the combination of a Rock Slide from that Garchomp, maybe an Air Slash from that Celesteela once this Leech Seed finally connects, and just try to, you know, hope that you keep flinching that Snorlax so it's unable to use Recycle, so it's unable to attack. Sometimes if you're in a situation like this, hoping for those flinches is really one of the most consistent things you can do.
Well, he has two moves that can flinch this Snorlax, so overall he's probably in ship shape to try and get that done every single turn. Just not allow Nathan to play any active, sort of aggressive turns in this game. Of course, if we do see the Snorlax go for attacks, if it catches things with this return, then it's going to be dealing a lot of damage. It's probably going to be taking knockouts. And I think on this turn, he needs to get through all of the attacks that are being thrown at him and get a successful return onto this Garchomp.
Well, we saw both that Rock Slide and the Air Slash connect. Snorlax doesn't flinch, instead goes for that return, targeting down the Garchomp, and it is a knockout. So Snorlax able to bring this down to a 1 versus 1. Snorlax versus Celesteela. Leech Seed versus Recycling, a Pinch Berry. And who knows, this game is far from over.
It really is. This Celesteela, though, could be enough to just wear down the Snorlax, especially with the Leech Seed in play, of course. It is interesting that he has Air Slash, and that's going to be able to really open some doors. I think turns where Snorlax flinches and isn't able to move, just like this one, are going to be invaluable. It looks like he's going to come very, very close indeed to being knocked out by another Air Slash. At least the combination of Air Slash and the Leech Seed will guarantee the knockout, and with that in mind, he's forced to recover this turn. That means another turn without any kind of, you know, damage output going towards that Celesteela. Air Slash is just enough to tidy it up.
Yeah, so Baris tying up this game. 1 win for Nathan, 1 win for Baris. We're going into game 3 here of round 6 of Swiss at the Pokemon North American International Championships. There is a lot on the board right now. We've seen these players, you know, sort of play out this matchup with the same 4 Pokemon almost both times, Celesteela being the last adaptation we saw from Baris. You think we're going to see another one?
I don't know if there's another adaptation needed. I think the 4 that he brought to that previous game were just a better selection. I did really, really enjoy his turn 1 with the Tapu Koko going after the Ninetales on Nathan's side of the field, and that's something that I'm curious to see. I would, if I switch it over to the look at Nathan's team, I think something like a Torkoal Lilligant might do fairly well here, as long as he's not trying to put everything to sleep. The threat of the Tapu Koko on Billa's side kind of answers that. You know, as long as he's not relying on things being put to and remaining asleep, I'll be curious to see exactly what Nathan decides. This time, he's locked in very, very quickly and leaves kind of the heat on Billa to make that decision.
Yeah, so I would love it if we saw that Torkoal Lilligant mode, I think, come out from Nathan. It's an interesting adaptation going into a game 3 to basically completely change up your strategy and your approach to a game. But when you need to win a game so you're able to, you know, go into the next couple of rounds feeling more confident about whether or not you're able to make it on to day 2 of Swiss, that's the kind of play you need to make sometimes.
It's a really big call if he wants to go for it. But with the Celesteela and Ninetales coming to the party, I don't think it's a bad play at all. The one thing I think Nathan's team is lacking a little bit is a way to control and change that terrain. If you can control that, get rid of the electric terrain, get some stuff to sleep, then he'd be in slightly better shape. But without that, Bill is able to just lead with Tapu Koko every single time and doesn't have to worry about the sport in the slightest.
Oh, here we go. Lilligant and Torkoal out on the field for Nathan. Baris sending in his Tapu Koko and his Ninetales combination. Nathaniel is switching it up.
I think this is one of his kind of rolls of the dice towards the end of the game. With the electric terrain in play, though, nothing can be put to sleep by Sleep Powder, and that's going to make for a very interesting use of this Lilligant. It is getting the Chlorophyll ability through use of the Drought, thanks to the Torkoal, but of the way Bill has been playing it as well, I don't think he's going to have many turns of the Drought in play. You know, he's probably going to have it switched up to something like the Snow Warning, bringing the Hail, with a nice switch in from the Ninetales, and even if we see something, you know, coming out from Lilligant, probably not going to be too threatening to a Ninetales.
Probably not, but, you know, Lilligant, I think looking at Nathan's team building, he has that Thunderbolt on the Porygon too, so I think the Tapu Koko matchup is something that he's thought out. Lilligant goes for an after you, but it fails, and Eruption is unable to connect with that Tapu Koko. Eruption will connect with that Ninetales, though, and bring it down to its Focus Sash, so Ninetales will have at least one more turn to attack, and it uses Roar to send Lilligant out of the field, and in its place, Snorlax gets dragged in.
No, I don't think that's going to be a great time at all. That after you failing, definitely helping out a little bit. As Tapu Koko now could probably just deal with the Torkoal rather comfortably. Ninetales in the same vein, you know, might be able to try and sort of help out a little bit. Ninetales might want to switch around so Baris can get some different moves in that slot. Maybe get the Hail back up so he can try and get an Aurora Veil in play towards the end of the game. And overall, you know, I think that's something that's going to be very, very important for him if he can get that into play.
I'm curious to see what exactly this Tapu Koko is going to do this turn. I don't think Snorlax is going to get knocked out quite yet, so maybe an opportunity for Snorlax to try and set up a belly drum, and maybe an opportunity for the Tapu Koko to use its Z move and try and get a knockout on one of the two Pokemon that Nathaniel has on his side of the field.
Another Gigavolt Havoc coming out from Nathaniel's side. And something I've noticed about Nathaniel's play, particularly in Game 1 and Game 2 as well, he's really lacking on Pokemon with the move Protect, I think. So, you know, not all of them having Protect, and even if he has it, he doesn't seem too inclined to use it.
Lilligant holding on, not knocked out by the Gigavolt Havoc. High horsepower from that Snorlax targeting down the Tapu Koko, and Ninetales goes for a second Roar, this time targeting that Snorlax, afraid of the belly drum, and Torkoal comes right back out onto the field.
Well, I'm very curious to see exactly how Nathan kind of shapes up with this. Baris looks like he's trying to deal with things such as the belly drum. Let him set it up and then roar it out. He's trying to deal with that Torkoal Lilligant by removing Torkoal from play. But after he does that, he's not following up with anything too major. After he's roared away the Snorlax, he didn't try and guess one of the last two remaining, and then hit it with big damage.
Tapu Koko protecting again, afraid of that Eruption. Lilligant going for a second after you. Torkoal happy to use the Eruption, this time able to successfully knock out the Ninetales.
Yeah, it's going to knock out the Ninetales, and that's probably something he wants removed. It means it's not going to switch out. It's not going to have the opportunity to come back in and reset the weather here. Of course, getting moves out of your Torkoal is a little bit hard because of its speed stat. But in this case, you know, you took a knockout on Ninetales. That's definitely something that Baris has been looking at using and really trying to capitalize on.
Arcanine coming out on the field, intimidating that Lilligant and the Torkoal, not going to help it out much, but more importantly, its typing, since it's a fire type, will not take as much damage from that eruption. So after you, not as big as a threat. I believe we've seen extreme speed on that Arcanine earlier on in this round, so able to potentially knock out the Lilligant before it's able to use after you. Great Pokemon to be out on the field right now if you're Baris.
We haven't seen, of course, the all of the moves that we've got on both sides of the field. But, I'd be curious to see if he just decides to try and take knockouts with this extreme speed. It's very, very good, of course. It does a lot more damage than the usual priority moves. And with that, Baris could swing momentum in his favor. While I'm looking at it on the board, though, this looks like a very essential turn in the game. And the player that makes the best prediction around this time probably going to take home the win in this series.
Well, whether that was a prediction or not, Nathaniel's Torkoal Protect not going to take damage from that Tapu Koko, but extreme speed from the Arcanine will be enough to knock out the Lilligant.
Yeah, well, this Torkoal is kind of left out to dry a little bit right now. It doesn't have the Trick Room option, or I should say it didn't have the Trick Room option, because Porygon 2 is only just arriving on the field. It now needs to set up Trick Room. It doesn't have the benefit of Torkoal potentially being able to stall out a turn with Protect. So it either has to fish for double Protect or just hope it doesn't get too readily knocked out.
There's that Snorlax in the back as well that Nathaniel could potentially switch into, but then you run into the same problem where Snorlax might take enough damage to where it couldn't use something like that Belly Drum anymore to boost its attack. So maybe the best thing for this Torkoal right now is to stay on the field and hopefully survive the combination of that Thunderbolt and the Flare Blitz from the Arcanine. Torkoal holds on with just 1 health point, goes for the Eruption. Not going to do a lot of damage. That's probably the lowest damage roll you could ever possibly get with Torkoal. But more importantly, it's still around for one more turn as Porygon 2 twists the dimensions.
Well, that might help out a little bit. The Sunlight did fade from play, so the attacks of Torkoal's fire typing are going to be a little bit weakened, but it's still going to have to start putting down some damage. It entirely depends on the moves on this Torkoal. Many people ran it with Heat Wave, which would knock out Tapu Koko and then get Arcanine, a little bit weaker. But at the same time, you're really limited in what you can do here. And Porygon 2 facing off against the Arcanine is definitely a slower one.
Well, Torkoal not ready to reveal whatever other attacks it's brought quite yet. Instead switches out and Snorlax takes the field in its place. Tapu Koko decides it needs a little bit of a change of scenery as well. And Celesteela takes the spot for it on Baris' side of the field. Porygon 2 with the Thunderbolt to target down that Arcanine. Gets the Paralysis, which will lower Arcanine's speed. It will cut it in half exactly, as Arcanine with the Flare Blitz will target down that Snorlax. So thanks to the Paralysis, we might be seeing this Arcanine move a little bit sooner than it otherwise would in the Trick Room.
We most certainly should be. This is going to be moving maybe even close to first. I think it definitely moved before the Porygon and after the Snorlax here. We did see the Celesteela as well was moving before the Porygon in Trick Room. So I don't think Baris is too concerned about it at all. He manages to get his Pokemon in to sort of capitalize on it. This Snorlax doesn't have the best kind of use right now. Doesn't have the moveset for it. This Celesteela in particular needs a lot more help.
Arcanine protecting this turn, not ready to deal any damage quite yet. Instead, goes for the high horsepower. Oh, excuse me. Snorlax goes for the high horsepower into that Arcanine. Porygon 2 with the Thunderbolt attacking that Celesteela to end the turn.
Yeah, getting a bit of damage down on Celesteela there is very interesting. Shows that it's a very, very bulky Celesteela. And the Arcanine, still sticking around. It's still not removed from play. That's something that's going to be a problem. I think Nathan really needs to get a little bit more out of this Snorlax, but I don't know if he has the time to set it up.
I'm not sure either. The Celesteela on the field will probably be happy to give it some time, but then we might end up in a situation like we were in Game 2 where those air slashes and those flinches will start coming into play. It's really kind of a precarious situation to be in if you are that Snorlax. Arcanine leaving the field, Tapu Koko coming back in its place and bringing back with it the electric terrain to potentially boost the power of that Porygon 2's Thunderbolts. So an interesting play there. Baris probably wanting to save that Intimidate, but Tapu Koko dodging the high horsepower. Celesteela connecting the Leech Seed with that Snorlax. Porygon 2 with the Thunderbolt will wrap up the turn, targeting that Tapu Koko.
Well, the Tapu Koko coming back in means that Thunderbolt's doing a little more damage because of
Just a little bit.
the benefit of electric terrain. definitely going to help out in this Porygon 2's quest to slay this Celesteela. You know, it's going to be slow and steady, especially with the recovery from Leech Seed. But overall, it certainly helps out a little bit. It's got to be something Nathan might cling on to try and see out the back end of this match.
So the Arcanine and the Celesteela are the last two Pokemon on Baris' side of the field. The Intimidate will certainly give Arcanine maybe a chance at surviving the high horsepower if it connects the next turn. So I'm really curious to see how Trick Room's going to play into these last final turns here. You know, on the one hand, I would think that Baris might want to try and stall out the Trick Room, maybe get Celesteela moving first so it can use Leech Seed on that Porygon 2 and start trying to flinch things. But given the fact that Arcanine is paralyzed, you know, it's almost like the Trick Room works just as well as it is working for Nathaniel as it does for Baris right now, barring, you know, the chance of being fully paralyzed and not moving. High horsepower will connect with the Arcanine this turn, but it does not knock it out and activates Arcanine's hold item in a pinch, going to eat that Aguav Berry and get its health almost back up to full. Arcanine, not fully paralyzed, goes for the Flare Blitz into that Snorlax. It almost knocks it out. Arcanine taking a nice chunk of damage in recoil and activating Snorlax's Pinch Berry in addition to its own. So lots of berries being snacked on this turn. Leech Seed from that Celesteela connecting with the Porygon 2. So Celesteela is happy to start sapping health from both these Pokemon. And the Thunderbolt gets a critical hit, almost knocks it out, but Celesteela hangs on.
Well, we see the shaking of the head from Baris there. He's very upset about that critical hit. I don't think he's not the most upset, but he is going to have to try and stall out this game with smart use of this Celesteela. We see the insane amount of recovery that's coming out of this Celesteela's use of Leech Seed, and with a Protect the next turn, that Celesteela is going to be coming very, very close, of course, to, you know, a position where it can take another Thunderbolt. But this Snorlax is still going to be able to work on this Arcanine. This Celesteela is going to get worked out by this Porygon 2. And Nathan's Pokemon are in a very solid position as a pairing. You know, when Trick Room ends, he's kind of faced with this awkward decision. Does he want to set Trick Room back up for Snorlax's benefit? Will he be able to use it to beat Arcanine? But, you know, Celesteela does have those Leech Seeds. You do need to spend turns attacking it and not setting up for the end of the game.
Nathaniel could also potentially switch out one of his Pokemon into that Torkoal to try and get rid of one of the Leech Seeds, but no switches yet, and Arcanine is fully paralyzed, cannot use Protect. Snorlax going for that Recycle to find its Figgy Berry once again, and Porygon 2 re-establishes the Trick Room out on the field.
Yeah, that's very important. Getting it back up, I think, is probably the right decision for him there. He wants to get it back up, so his Snorlax is very, very threatening indeed. Of course, he is going to be lowered in his health just under that 50% mark, and we're going to see the Berry be activated again that he recycled the previous turn. So that Berry coming back into play is making that Snorlax, again, a problem to deal with. Celesteela's recovering a ton of health, though. It's coming back nearly to full. If it isn't knocked out, if it doesn't take any damage, it will actually go back to full health at the end of this turn. And overall, you know, I think the way this team has been built by Baris is there to try and capitalize on that Leech Seed.
He's doing a great job. I think Nathaniel's only win condition right now is to knock out that Arcanine, maybe get Torkoal in safely, and then target it down with whatever Fire-type move it has that isn't named Eruption.
Yes, when he can get that in play, he's going to be good. So his focus right now is 100% that Arcanine. It is fully paralyzed. It may struggle to stall out with potential protects. This turn, it doesn't struggle with that, though.
Arcanine able to protect this turn. Snorlax with the high horsepower into that protecting Arcanine. Celesteela with the Air Slash going for a little bit of damage on the Snorlax, not going for flinches on the Porygon 2 quite yet. Porygon 2 with the Thunderbolt into Celesteela this time. No critical hit. Celesteela is going to get a lot of health back, but slowly just whittling it down.
Yes, what he really needs to do, in Nathan's case, is just try and deal with Arcanine. And I'd be curious to see this turn, after we saw the Protect the previous turn, if he maybe doubles into that slot while Celesteela's likely to Protect, then he's able to bring in Torkoal under a Trick Room to deal with his Celesteela. But we've seen people really stall out and bring games to a grinding halt with Celesteela. Of course, if he brings in the Torkoal, brings it in on a potential Air Slash, he's going to lose it immediately on the way in. But Nathan just needs to deal with Arcanine right now. He needs to deal with Arcanine with Snorlax and maybe Porygon 2, and then try and, you know, bring in that Torkoal, or just keep going for it with these Thunderbolts. You know, Those Thunderbolts are doing a lot of damage while the electric terrain is in play. That is, of course, going to be running out very, very shortly for us.
Snorlax with the return connects with the Arcanine, but Arcanine not knocked out. Flare Blitz might do enough damage in recoil, though, to knock it out, depending on how much it does to that Porygon 2. It's going to be close, but Arcanine has at least one more turn on the field. Air Slash from Celesteela into the Porygon 2 as well, but Porygon 2, no flinch, no knockout. Thunderbolt into the Arcanine for that knockout.
Well, this comes down very, very interestingly. The Celesteela doesn't go for Protect, does manage to get some damage down and recover its health with leftovers and a double portion of Leech Seed, of course. Baris probably going on the offense to make sure that when that Torkoal comes in, it doesn't come in and stick around. It gets immediately removed from play. We are going to see one more Leech Seed, this time on the Porygon 2. It is enough to knock out that Porygon 2, and that could be very, very important for Nathan. This Snorlax is going to be the slowest thing on the field. Alongside the Torkoal, they're both slower, of course, than the Celesteela. Just naturally, the way they're trained really emphasizes that point. And Torkoal comes back in, bringing the sun with it, of course. There is no weather in play right now, not even contested. And assuming it has a Fire-type move that isn't Eruption, will be doing a bunch of damage to the Celesteela. If it falls a little bit short, then of course this Snorlax is in a great position to just finish it up. There is no Leech Seed down on this Torkoal, so Celesteela, isn't going to be recovering as much. It isn't able to open up an opportunity to try and do that.
This game is going to come down to the wire. Celesteela buys itself at least one more turn with that Protect. Torkoal revealing that it has Flamethrower and not Heat Wave. Snorlax not even going for an attack this turn, instead using this opportunity to recycle and make sure that it has that Figgy Berry to snack on to bring its health almost back up to full.
Yes, that's very, very important. We are going to see, obviously Celesteela get all the way back up to exactly 100% of its health. Get a little bit of recovery off this Snorlax, keep it weak, but a smart turn by Nathan there. He knows that his Torkoal is going to be able to do the business. And his Snorlax, if that Torkoal does for some reason get stalled out by the Celesteela, then of course it's going to be done. Celesteela looks for the double protect.
Goes for the double protect and it gets it. This is the last turn of Trick Room.
This is the only way out. It's the only way out for Baris.
Snorlax uses Recycle to get that Figgy Berry back, but Baris now, Celesteela will be moving first in the next turn, will have the opportunity to try and flinch that Snorlax or flat out knock out the Torkoal if that's the direction he decides to go in for this battle.
Yeah, these players really went for it in that turn, but that was the only way out. Baris knowing it was the last turn of Trick Room, the double protect, the infamous double protect coming through for Baris at that very last minute. Torkoal knows it's in trouble right now. He's not even able to set up Trick Room, so he needs to start getting some damage down.
Torkoal with the protect, heavy slam into the Torkoal, and Snorlax maximizing its attack with a belly drum. It has that berry on standby. It's ready to take this Celesteela head on. Yeah,
well, we see Nathan establishes that Torkoal isn't going to be able to win this match. He may have saved it for later, but it's not going to save him in this situation. So Snorlax, what it goes for here, does work in that belly drum. It's probably going to have to start working in another recycle, but now it's maximized its attack. It becomes a very, very, very interesting matchup indeed against this Celesteela. It's doing so much damage. We actually see, Snorlax may be able to do it. It is, of course, limited to return, which is a not very effective attack, but it's going to be doing so much to Celesteela every single turn. It could come close. Nathan may just have to put all his eggs in the Snorlax basket, maybe try and find a very odd opening where Baris ignores the Torkoal just to, go for it. It doesn't look like that's what he's going to do. He's going to play it safe and get rid of it.
Celesteela happy to get rid of that Torkoal and remove the threat of those flamethrowers from the field. Gets a Beast Boost as well. It gets that Beast Boost in defense. So Snorlax return won't be as potent thanks to that. It brings it down to just above half of its health. Happy to take that leftovers. Happy to take that Leech Seed. This is such an incredible match. It's going down to the wire. There's only seconds left.
Yes, we are going to see a very interesting matchup. If you look right at the bottom of our screen, we're very close to time. We're not 100% to the timer that the judge on that table has. We're going to be keeping updated in our ears to make sure we know exactly what's going on. But with that Beast Boost coming through in defense, it looks like Baris is actually going to be able to tidy this one up. The Air Slash is going to get some flinches. Snorlax just isn't able to do enough. It is going to have to spend a lot of time, buying time, working on the recycles.
Well, it gets this first recycle, finds that Figgy Berry, immediately chows down on it to bring its health back up, but Celesteela happy to just keep taking some of that health as its own.
Yes, Celesteela's going to be covering with both leftovers and a leech seed every single time. So Nathan's helping his Snorlax out, giving it some health back every single time, but it's just losing it to leech seed. We did see as well, even the return after the belly drum isn't doing more than 50% to this Celesteela. Now Celesteela, with the combination of leech seed and leftovers, is recovering enough so every 2 turns, it's barely losing out on health, and it's almost awkward for Nathan to try and activate this berry. He doesn't get to use it as easily. This Celesteela has been sticking around at full health for the majority of this game. It's been sat here for turns and turns and turns, and now it's at full health. It's able to start wearing it down even quicker with air slashes. Those flinches are going to slow things right down.
No flinch this turn. Return from the Snorlax, able to connect with the Celesteela and bring it back down to just about where it was a couple turns ago.
Yeah, it's very, very close, but we've seen a couple turns of Protects. Gonna bring it very close indeed. You know, this Snorlax is losing health over and over again. This time, after it loses health to the Leech Seed, it actually doesn't have a berry. So if he wants to win this game, as the timer comes in and as we approach the +3 turns, a slightly newer edition this year, you know, if he spends a turn trying to set up with the recycle, he's not going to get any damage out. He's going to just keep losing health to this air slash, which may even
flinch. There's the flinch. Snorlax unable to attack, unable to recycle. It's going to be close. It looks like with the help of that Leech Seed, one more air slash will be enough to knock out that Snorlax and give Baris the win, able to move on to round 7 of Swiss undefeated.
Yeah,
what an amazingly close game.
Nathan can't believe it, but I think Baris, as soon as that time got called, you know, we hit those +3 turns, secured himself. Once he got rid of the Torkoal with that double protect, he was just in such a good position to make this play and win this game. Nathan coming so close. He had that Trick Room, and this is the downfall of the Trick Room teams. It's so difficult to capitalize on that Trick Room against a player like Baris, who knows how to stall it out. The headsets are off, the handshakes are in, and I think these players are just waiting pretty much to, you know, round out this game.
Yeah, the move timer slowly counts down, so I think they're leaving it up to, I don't know, whatever's chance is.
Yeah, we see the judge there, you know, slowly filling in the match slip, just making sure it's all been approved while the players have a bit of a conversation. So what's going on in the top there, not so relevant. You know, both these players going to just time out. Nathan looking absolutely distraught. The game decides it's time for an air slash anyway. That's going to just secure the game on screen for you as well.
Yeah, so, you know, Nathaniel played so well during that game. It's unfortunate that